Good morning. Okay, I know some of you are still hungover. I heard there was a big party yesterday, but maybe we can do better. Good morning. Yes, that's more like it. Well, that gives me a sense as to whether people are awake or not. I'm trying to find a spot rather where I can see the sleepists in the room as I go through my talk. So as introduced, my name is Eustace. I'm from Pali, South African, and what we are is a buy local campaign. What informs the existence of a buy local campaign is the fact that as a country we battle inequality, poverty, and most of it stems from the fact that a lot of our people are unemployed. We all know of someone who's unemployed, whether someone in your own family, someone down the street, someone in your church. You're handed over CVs. When people ask you, what do you do? And you tell them what to do, especially because I know I'm talking to procurement people. Then people start asking you for tenders. Ne? As if you walk around with tenders in your pockets. And, as if and the bulk of the time is because people are really stranded. People are desperate. And as a result of that, we have to start looking at ways in which we can start turning the economy around. So I thought I'll give you some slides to indicate to you what has caused this, 27% unemployment rate that we have in our country. In terms of numbers, it is said that there's about 9 million people who are eligible for employment that are not employed in this country. And what we used to have as a country, if you look at the first slide, it shows, just focus on the red portion, maybe in the interest of time. There's a timer, I'm being timed. So in the interest of time, I'll only focus on manufacturing because it's a sector that has the ability to create a lot of jobs directly in those factories that make the products as well as in the factories and the companies that feed in to those products and supply them with the raw material or the components they need to make their products. So if you look at the red portion of the first pie chart, manufacturing used to account for 20.9% of what the GDP is made up of. 20.9% contribution to the GDP in 1994. But fast forward to 2015, that contribution dropped from 20.9% to 12.4%. And that is as a result of this situation. So I've just given you an example. I took one sector within manufacturing, and I focused only on the clothing, textiles, footwear, and leather sector, where we used to have 1,600 factories in the country. And in 1996, 20 years later, that number dropped by 700, and we're only sitting with 900 factories in the country at this point in time. The reason for that decline in the number of factories employing a lot of South Africans and people living within the borders of South Africa is because there was a 480% increase in imports. So instead of producing everything that we consume as a country, we started opening up our borders, and a lot of these products that came into the country came from China, because then there was a 730% increase in imports from China. What that has done, though, is that it has resulted in a loss of 110,000 jobs between 2002 and 2017. In 2002, you had 200,000 people employed in the clothing and textiles, footwear and leather industry, but that dropped to 90,000 rands. So 110,000 people unemployed who were previously employed in that sector, and that translates to many more. It is said that one salary in the South African context provides for 6 to 7 or 8 people in some instances. I know in my family that that's the case. There's something called black tax. I don't know if you're familiar with black tax. That when you get paid, it's not just your salary. You start dividing. Before you pay your own debts, you start sharing with the others. I know that on that day, the specific day when I get paid, even if I wake up and I have meetings and I'm running around, what will remind me that I've gotten paid are the please call me's that I'll get from my family members. And when they send those please call me's, they're not saying I must phone them. They're saying I must send the grants, the SASA that I'm running as a result of being employed. So how do we then turn the economy around? We need to support SMMEs. It is said that in developed economies, at least 90% of the GDP comes from activities within the SMME sector. And in our country, it's as low as 45%. And the target in the NDP, obviously, is to try and get it to that 90%, so that the economy can start churning out as many jobs as we need. The reliance at this point in time is on the public sector to create jobs, which is not right. So SMMEs are looking for assistance with information, access to finance, but the most important for us is access to markets. If we are not buying from them, these SMMEs are going to close faster than they set up their own shops. So we have to find ways to open up markets. And those of you sitting in this room are a market. You are buying consumables, you are buying products on a daily basis. Who are you buying from? Are you buying from SMMEs? And if you're buying from those SMMEs, what you're doing is that you are helping them retain the jobs that they have, but as we buy from them and they need to produce more, there will be a need for them to employ more people. And it's as simple as that. So we need to open up markets, and that's why one of the things that is tried and tested all over the world is the buy local phenomenon. We know what Trump says. Trump is arrogant about it, but to an extent he's right. If you look at the unemployment numbers in the US, they are the lowest they've been in many, many decades. And he's gotten it right somewhere. It might not all be attributed to his stance around imports coming into the US, but what he's saying is that if we can make it as a country, why are we buying it from elsewhere? So this is just an example of what the US is doing to revive their automotive sector. So outside of the rhetoric that we hear from Trump daily, there is work that they're doing behind the scenes. This is a campaign that they rolled out a few years ago, even before Trump came into office. But I just want to demonstrate to you that buying local is a global phenomenon. It's not unique to South Africa, and other people are doing it, hence the low unemployment rate currently in the US. And there's a campaign where they focus on the automotive sector. Detroit is popular for producing cars, and you will see an ad that shows you that what they're trying to do is to revive that sector. The guy in the ad talks about halftime. So he's saying in the first half, so it's similar to a sporting game, whether it's rugby or soccer, where he says in the first half we did well, but towards the end of the first half, we started losing it. We started bringing imports, started buying cars that come from outside of the US. And what that did is a lot of the jobs in that industry were lost. So he's saying it's halftime. They need to regroup so that in the second half, we can hear the roar of their engines, and that's what he's saying. And by that, he simply means that we are going to, they're going to fight unemployment in Detroit by getting as many Americans employed in that automotive sector. So let me play the ad so that it gives you a sense of what other countries are doing to support and drive buy local.
It's halftime. Both teams are in their locker room discussing what they can do to win this game in the second half. It's halftime in America, too. People are out of work and they're hurting, and they're all wondering what they're gonna do to make a comeback. And we're all scared because this isn't a game. The people of Detroit know a little something about this. They almost lost everything. But we all pulled together. Now Motor City is fighting again. I've seen a lot of tough eras, a lot of downturns in my life, and times when we didn't understand each other. It seems that we've lost our heart at times. The fog of division, discord, and blame made it hard to see what lies ahead. But after those trials, we all rallied around what was right and acted as one. Because that's what we do. We find a way through tough times, and if we can't find a way, then we'll make one. All that matters now is what's ahead. How do we come from behind? How do we come together? And how do we win? Detroit's showing us it can be done. And what's true about them is true about all of us. This country can't be knocked out with one punch. We get right back up again, and when we do, the world's gonna hear the roar of our engines. Yeah, it's halftime, America. And our second half's about to begin.
And considering the fact that they rolled out that campaign about 4 or 5 years ago, and if you look at the unemployment numbers now, they've done relatively well in their second half. So we are still lagging behind. Why do we advocate for buying local? One, it contributes to the creation of jobs. I think it's straightforward. If people buy from you, you retain the jobs in a company, and as you produce more, because there's increased demand for your products, you are more likely to employ more people. Secondly, contributes to the growth of the economy. One of the things that we have is a stagnant economy, and in fact, we're in a technical recession now because the economy has stopped growing. And the power lies in the hands of those of you who buy. We cannot just leave it to one sector of the economy. The private sector has to play their part. The public sector has to play their part. And as individual households, we also have to start making purchasing decisions in favor of locally made products so that the economy can grow to a point where many more of us can start participating in economic activity. It also contributes to skills development as companies come into the country and invest because they bring with them the skills, the technology, and the know-how. They absorb those who are not skilled into those companies, and in the process of being employed, they acquire skills which they did not have previously. Lastly, as a campaign, we advocate for buying high-quality products. And when I give you the criteria around what we stand for, you will see that one of the biggest things for us that we talk about is the fact that locally made products that we are advocating for are those that are of a high-quality nature. So as a campaign, we promote the buying of locally made products, either in the public sector, the private sector, or even as consumers, ordinary consumers. And all of that is done to make sure that we can grow the economy. We provide education to the public sector. There's legislation around preferential procurement in the public sector, so we give support with regards to that, and I'll demonstrate how we do that for you shortly. We also talk to the private sector, and I'll give you a sense of how we do that. We educate consumers on the importance of buying local and the economic impact thereof. And lastly, we promote accessibility of local products and services, because those who want to buy local products and those who want to support this campaign of ours might not necessarily know where to find the products, might not necessarily know how to identify the products. And we have a few programs that I'll show to you in a few minutes' time that demonstrate how you can easily access locally made products and services. So for our purposes, any company that uses the proudly South African logo has complied with these 4 criteria. The first one is the fact that the product must be of a high quality nature, must be locally made, in that, and when we say local content, it must contain sufficient local content to a point where even in instances where you bring in the raw materials from outside, the conversion of those materials must happen within the borders of South Africa. So let's talk components. Let's give an example. Hisense is not necessarily South African. We do not look at shareholding, but what we look at is where the production process happens. So Hisense is a Chinese company. They've set up shop. We are calling for your foreign direct investment. There's an investor conference happening right now where the president is calling for foreign direct investment so that we can help turn the economy around. Those are the kind of companies we look for. They bring some of the components from outside of South Africa, specifically from China. But what we want is those components in assembling the TV sets that they make at the Hisense factory in Cape Town. You know, the actual components must be such that they're substantially transformed when making the final product, so that what goes into the market, you know, the value addition of what goes into the market happens within the borders of South Africa, such that people are employed. In the case of raw materials, those raw materials that input into the final product must be substantially transformed within the borders of South Africa, so that there are jobs created as part of that process. So that is what we look for, whether the product is locally made or not. Secondly, and I spoke about it, I touched on it, but I'll go back to it. Quality. Quality is prescribed by what is required in that specific industry. So if it's a product that is consumed as a food product, we look at the health and safety issues, and we look at the standards as prescribed in that specific industry. And if a product complies with that standard, then it gets a tick from us. The last 2 issues are very important for us in that we do not want companies that affiliate to us not to comply with the labor legislation of the country. So they have to treat their workers fairly, comply with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And the very last one is that in the process of producing your products, do not harm the environment, implement sound environmental standards, dispose of waste responsibly, and recycle where possible. So the minute you see any product carrying the proudly South African logo, you know that because it carries the proudly South African logo, which is made up of the colors of the South African flag, it means the product is locally made. And the tick in the logo, the green tick in the logo, represents the fact that it's a high-quality product. This is not necessarily important, but for those of you who come from organizations where you would want to take membership, the perception out there is that membership is expensive. It's not really expensive. It's 500 rands for SMMEs that have turnover up to 5 million rands, and the bulk or the maximum that anyone can ever pay is 100,000 rands, and that is for entities with turnover of 100 million rands and above. These are some of the members to give you a sense as to who carries the proudly South African logo and who has gone through the vetting process and is out there supplying high-quality, locally made products. It ranges from Hisense, I spoke about them, Twiza, Grainfield Chickens, is a chicken producer, Mac produce detergents, Olympic Paints are paint producers, Standard Bank is services, Aspen and Adcock provide pharmaceutical products. Sohosan is a hotel group. Edcon is Edgar's Jet, Botmans, and those stores that we all frequent. OBC, poultry suppliers. Country Bed Holdings, the same. Mango is an airline. SAB produce beer. A lot of beer was flowing last night, I heard. So what we're looking for are companies that produce high-quality products across all sectors, and hence the mixed bag of companies that I've shown to you, I've demonstrated it in these two slides. To demonstrate that we have companies in every single industry you can think of, from pharmaceuticals to poultry producers, to beer producers, to airlines, to Nestle producing chocolates, coffee, and some of those products that we all use in our households. So at any given time, there's no excuse. You will be able to find a product for whatever sector you are looking for if you go through our database. And that is what we stand for as Pali South African. So let me give a bit of background, because I know some of you are impacted on by this legislation in the public sector. So as procurement people in the public sector, you have to comply with this legislation. It was signed into law in June 2011, following the signing of the local procurement accord, where government said if anyone in government buys those designated products, they have to buy from companies that make them locally. So on the 7th of December 2011, the DTI was empowered to designate specific industries, and what that did is it gave rise to this list that you're going to see that you see on your screen now. 23 items. Let me give quick examples. Rail rolling stocks. That is what is bought by Transnet and PRASA. So whether they buy diesel locomotives, electric locomotives, any train that ends up on the rails in South Africa has to have at least 65% of that train manufactured in South Africa. That is the law. If you are impacted on by the triple PFA or the PFMA or the MFMA, you have to comply with this legislation. Bus bodies, Rea Vaya here in Joburg, My City in Cape Town, Arieng in Pretoria. So anyone who rolls out a bus rapid transit system or buys buses for their metros or municipalities, they have to make sure that those buses are locally made. Canned processed vegetables, that is what is bought for, canteens, if the entities buy it themselves, that is what is bought for the prisons, for the hospitals, for the clinics. Anyone who buys any of those items, or even for the school feeding schemes, the nutrition programs in the schools, anyone who's responsible for buying those has to make sure that they buy that which is made in South Africa. Textile, clothing, leather, and footwear, the clinics, the hospitals, any linen that you buy for your entities. A lot of you come from, or in fact, all of you come from universities and tertiary institutions. If there is any buying that you are doing for linen, for your residential, your residences, has to be bought locally because you are part of the public sector. So the rules are quite clear. If you buy anything as a public sector procurement official that is part of that list, you have to buy from a company that makes it locally. Let me go through the rest of the list quickly. Solar water heaters, set-top boxes, certain pharmaceutical products, furniture. We all buy furniture for our institutions. If you buy furniture, you have to make sure that that furniture is locally made. Electrical and telecom cables as part of the maintenance that happens in your institutions. Valves products and actuators, working vessels, electricity meters, conveyance pipes, transformers, building and construction materials has to be locally made. Not middlemen who are going to receive the tenders from you and go and buy the stuff from China. We hear stories, especially MECs of economic development, their premiers, ministers, especially municipal managers and their mayors. They go into public platforms and they talk about the fact that they are rolling out township revitalization projects and they're supporting businesses in the township. But where are the products being supplied coming from? People will come and say, we supported 500 township businesses, we spent 100 million rands, but all you've done is you've empowered and enriched 500 people. Because in the most of the time, you find that those people are middlemen. All they do is they have a small office in their houses where they just have a system where they just shop for quotations. They look for tenders, you issue the tenders, they shop for quotations from all over the world, they get onto a plane, they go buy the stuff, they come back, they deliver to you. You sit and say, I've bought from a township business, I've supported an SMME, but all you've done is you've enriched 1%. Whoever came up with the term tenderpreneur was onto something, I think. Because those people are not entrepreneurs, they're tenderpreneurs. Entrepreneur goes out and sets up a business and employs people as part of the value chain. And they know that they're impacting not just on the people they employ, but on the people that they also buy from. So if you're producing water as a company, the people that supply you with the tops, with the bottles, with the packaging, the labeling, Those are companies that we support. That is what we're looking for. So when a minister comes and says we've supported 500 companies, we need those 500 companies to have people employed so that it's not just one person who is enriched. That's why when you go to places like Limpopo, Hona Lebo Tender Park, it's because everyone who stays there has benefited in one way or another from a tender. And people keep getting richer, whilst the majority of the people keep getting poorer. So what we're looking for are entrepreneurs who will supply these products, but make sure that those products that are going to supply to all of you are locally made, so that the impact is felt in the economy. So we package a lot of access to market programs, and the first one I want to talk about is linked to what I've just presented. We've set up a tender monitoring system. So what we do through the tender monitoring system is that we've developed an algorithm which is linked to a lot of the sites. Some of the sites are your sites. We've looked for entities, public entities, whether at national government level, at provincial government level, at local government level, as well as any of the entities that report to government. And we've looked for sites where they advertise their tenders, because those regulations that I've just demonstrated now around designations are applicable to every single one of those entities. So at any given time, if any of those entities advertise a tender, because we are linked, the link we have is to that tender page, we pick up an alert, and that alert tells us that there's a change on that page. We will go into that page, and we'll check if any of the changes relate to you putting up a new tender, and if the tender relates to an item that is designated. So let me give you an example. City of Joburg issued a tender, and the tender was for furniture. Furniture is designated. As a government entity, as a municipality, they needed to make sure that when they issue the tender, the provisions are clear in that tender that said they are going to only consider bids from companies that are going to supply locally made products. So in the bidding documents, the companies must indicate that they are going to supply locally made furniture. They did not have that provision. So we identified the tender because we got an alert that there's a change on that page linked to the keywords that we've put in there. And we found that it's a tender for furniture without those provisions. So we wrote to them and we asked them to reissue the tender. Reissue the tender with the correct provisions that says the first round of evaluation is going to focus on whether the companies are going to supply locally made products or not. Anyone who does not indicate that in the first round of evaluation has to fall off the process, such that when you get to second round of evaluation and you're evaluating on price and BEE and functionality, you are comparing apples with apples. They are all companies supplying locally made products. Because if you're going to allow companies that supply locally made products to compete with products that come from outside of the country, which in some instances are highly subsidized, then the local companies are always going to battle to compete in terms of pricing. So we have that tender monitoring system, and it helps us to intervene when the tender is issued. The value add for our members, though, is that as the tenders come out, we send it to them and we say, here's a tender. You indicated to us that you're a company based in Soweto, which is part of the City of Joburg. The City of Joburg has issued a tender for furniture. Please bid for the tender. So the excuse of people saying, we've issued a tender, no one responded that could fit the criteria of supplying locally made products. We then close that gap. We know that we have companies in our books that we've vetted for quality and local content as demonstrated earlier on, and those companies will then be in a position to can deliver the furniture that you're looking for. So the excuse is not there. And what we're doing now is, as part of this database that we've developed as Policy of Ken, we are integrating the database of member companies that we have with the central supplier database. So if the requirement on your side for anyone to do business with you is that they need to be registered on the central supplier database, we're closing that gap. Because previously we'd identify the tenders as part of our tender monitoring system. We would send the tenders to our base, so we'd say company X in Soweto, here's a tender from City of Joburg for furniture, you make furniture, please bid for the tender. And you find that they are not eligible to do so because they are not registered on the central supplier database. So we're closing that gap. As of the 1st of December, we hope to have an integration system, the integrated system working where at any given time, once we approve a member and they sit on our database, their information replicates to the central supplier database. And the central supplier database then accepts them as a member or as a company registered to do business with government. So we're closing that gap. At any given time, if you want to buy a locally made product and the CSD was a hindrance previously, or the fact that you could not find local companies that make locally made products, talk to us. The database exists. We're sitting with 1,350 companies, all producing high quality locally made products. Not chancers, the Punalobo Vuyo in this country, people with dreams who say they're business people, but they're still dreaming. And they still have ideas. Here we're not talking about people with ideas, we're talking about people who are already doing business and are producing high quality locally made products. So talk to us, at any given time, if you have a requirement, send us a mail. I'll give my details at the end, where we will then give you, a list of companies you require. You just tell us, I'm looking for companies in this sector. We'll give you that list. The other alternative is to go onto our site. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen is a screenshot of search results. So companies who are not really keen to talk to us, but they want to do it themselves, you can go onto our website. There's a search functionality. You can go in there, type in the keyword, there's a drop-down option, choose the industry, and type in the keyword. If you're looking for water, you just type water, and it will give you a list of companies that make and manufacture water in the country. If it's furniture you're looking for, you go in and you say furniture, it will give you a list. That is an example of how the results look like. It will give you the name of the company, their contact details, including their website address, their email address, as well as every other detail you might require to get hold of them. The growing shopping trend in the country is that people are buying on online shopping platforms. So one of the things that we've done is we've then looked at, what is sold on those platforms, and we discovered that what is sold on those platforms is not necessarily locally made. A lot of our people are going on there, buying stuff that they don't necessarily know where it comes from. But what that is doing is that it's creating jobs in China and wherever else those products come from. So because if you buy a product that comes from China, you are creating a job in China. So what we've done is we've developed a site to counter this trend that carries exclusively locally made products that are vetted by us, that are supplied by our members. So at any given time, if you go to rsamade.co.za, you are going to find a locally made product. We are currently populating the site. We only launched it at the end of August. We hope to roll out a campaign from the 15th of November once we know that we've populated it with as many products as possible. We're putting electronics, baby products, and many other products onto that site. So please support the site, rsamade.co.za. The timing of the launch is made to coincide with the festive season period. There's a lot of buying that happens around the festive season time. So what we're doing is we're talking to South Africans around that time to say, when you're buying gifts or anything else that you need for the festive season, please buy it from a company that makes it locally. These are commitments that we get from companies. So because of time, I'm running out of time, I just want to summarize quickly. What we look for, so those are 4 sets of examples of the work we do. We go to the private sector and we get commitments from them to ring-fence items. So ahead of the job summit, we went to banks, for example, and we said to the banks, you buy a lot of furniture, you buy a lot of stationery. Where's the furniture and stationery coming from? Ring-fence it for SMMEs, ring-fence it for SMMEs that make their products locally. We went to the likes of Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa, and we said, there are a lot of resources that go into your products. Is it sugar? Find emerging farmers that grow sugar and buy from them. Find emerging farmers as SAB that grow hops and buy from them. And those are the commitments we took to the Job Summit. We took a total of 25 commitments from 25 large corporates. So we're not just talking to you as tertiary institutions, we're talking to everyone in the country. Those commitments were tabled at the Job Summit, and we're keeping track of them, and we will provide feedback reports a year down the line. We also then lobby support for businesses from interest groups and organizations that represent a lot of buying. Example that I've given, there's Franchise Association of South Africa, where they represent all franchises, whether they be in the food space or the non-food space. We had a workshop where we took 21 of those companies into a workshop with Franchise Association, where the companies that we represent each had 2 minutes. We took 21 companies. Each of them had 2 minutes to present what they offer. One of the biggest deals that has come out of the O2 that are pending. One is a company that provides paint. Every single franchise paints, whether when you open doors or when you perform maintenance. And we said, instead of buying your paint and advising your franchisees to buy paint from outside of the country, please buy from companies that make the products locally. We then also have a company that supplies condiments, and KFC is talking to that company to customize the production line to suit their requirements, so that the condiments that are going to be rolled out in KFC all over the country are going to come from a black-owned company, SMME, that manufactures the condiments locally. So we are getting every single South African that buys to participate in this buy local phenomenon. We have an expo where we participate, companies participate in. We have other access to market platforms similar to this. So maybe as I conclude, because I'm out of time, let me talk about this slide and then conclude. This slide demonstrates that we then do linkages. The likes of Nestle, we're rolling out a micro-distribution program with their SMMEs. They needed to buy vehicles. We introduced them to Nissan. Nissan makes the cars in Pretoria. There are lots of jobs that were sustained as a result of that transaction. Same thing with National Security and Fire, who are the CHAP, the armed response people. They use we advise them to take bakkies from Nissan so that the jobs that are in Roslyn, where Nissan manufactures the bakkies, are safeguarded. We roll out campaigns, and in conclusion, we're going to again, for the festive season, like I said a few minutes ago, roll out a campaign that says to every single South African, when making purchasing decisions, either for the festive season or for the new calendar year, for the new school year that starts in January, please buy local so that we can all contribute to sustaining those jobs that are in those factories, as well as creating new jobs. What will underpin that campaign is this ad. Some of you might have seen it, and for those of you who have not seen it, please indulge us and pay attention. Try to follow the messaging in the video, because it gives you a sense of the economic impact that each of our purchasing decisions can make on the economy if we start buying local.
We started with so much hope. We opened the doors and the light poured in. But then, slowly at first, things stopped working. And people had to leave. Maybe we were careless or indifferent. After all, we made all the decisions. We chose to buy imported goods instead of our own. We thought we'd lost it all. Our jobs, our businesses, our hope. But it doesn't have to be this way. By choosing to buy local, we buy back jobs and the future we were destined for.
Thank you. You can't ignore that rallying call from a respected elderly statesman, our own Wakanda. So that's my presentation. If you want more information, please come to our stand. We have a stand right if you go out here down the passage. Please send us an email if you're looking for information, info@proudlysa.co.za, and we will be able to assist you with your requirements, especially on finding locally made products that are made by companies that are creating jobs. Thank you.